Recently, India has faced a 50% tariff on all its exports to the USA. These exports have significantly impacted the Indian economy. But India has shown true resilience in these difficult times. So, how does US tariffs affect the Indian economy in the immediate and short term? And how has India coped with this challenge and is facing this challenge by restructuring its economy and alliances? Let's see in today's video. The US government has falsely accused India of fueling the Russian-Ukraine war. Because India is purchasing the Russian oil, the US government has accused India as being the main reason why we cannot achieve global peace. But India cannot bow down to such an accusation. Even though China is buying more quantity of the Russian oil, US does not want to engage in a direct war with China at this point of time. So it wants to pressurize India to comply with its demands and create a favorable alliance for the US government so that in future it can join hands with India and fight against China. Ultimately, Trump's policy is an America First policy. It means that Trump has no allies. He is only concerned about his own country and making it secure and safe. The recent tariffs imposed by the US government has immediately affected the Indian economy and the labor-intensive sectors like jewelry, gems, apparels and textiles, leather and footworks, automobiles and parts, etc. We can already see that in case of textiles industry, Noida and Coimbatore, which are considered big hubs, have already dealt the blow. The MSMEs are facing a severe shock because of the drop in the leather industry. This is also true for shrimp and other seafood exporters. The immediate and short-term effect has been that the exporters may face delayed and cancelled orders, stretched receivable cycles, and especially in case of SEZ zones, there might be a drop in the order levels. We can see that this might impact the Indian GDP also. Economists predict that a 0.2 to 0.4% reduction in the GDP, which might mean that the Indian GDP will fall below 6%. There will be a mass threat of job loss also, as we can see that implementing the 50% tariffs would mean that all the exports to the US would be rendered uncompetitive in the US market and the livelihoods of the Indian people would ultimately suffer. The service sector is an industry which India is largely exporting. The booming IT and technological service sector in India is already catering the US economy, and it is so far untouched by the US government. So we can hope that the service sector will act as an immediate buffer in this economic shock. But we are not sitting with our hands tied. We have already taken measures to restructure the economy and our alliances, as we can see. But before that, why does the Indian government refuse to comply with the Trump's demands? Apart from these tariffs, the US also wants to sell its products in the Indian market. The US dairy farming consists of large herds of sizes and is vastly mechanized. If these dairy products enter the Indian market, the poor farmer who survives on an average of 3 cattle will face a stiff competition and in future will have to be eliminated from this economic scenario. Similarly, the genetically modified crops from US like maize and soybean, if it enters the Indian industry, will affect the Indian diverse seed bank and the small farmers. We are already taking a very cautious approach in case of genetically modified crops, allowing the US government to bring their genetically modified varieties here in the Indian scenario will be a tough choice for us. We can also see that the poultry products and other grain varieties like rice, maize, etc. are indeed waiting for the Indian markets to open. If the Indian market becomes open to these US varieties, the poor farmer and agriculturists whose sole source of income are the subsidized rates from the government will have to face a stiff competition and an end to their livelihood means. Even the dry fruits imported from US like walnuts, and almonds, and fruits like apples and cherries will also pose a stiff competition to the farmers in Jammu Kashmir and Himachal Pradesh who solely depend on tourism and such exotic fruits and dry fruits for their livelihood. So it is of paramount importance to us that we do not bow to these external pressures and find a way out of these pressures to strengthen our economy from within and forge new alliances for a better survival. As a short-term measure, the government has given some immediate relief for the Indian traders. It has provided immediate liquidity and compliance relief to the exporters. Also, we can see that the government is helping maintain them the order levels and providing them support in case of employment losses. In the medium and long term, we can see that the government is engaging and leveraging its existing free trade agreements. As we know, already India has signed a free trade agreement with the United Kingdom. It is also pursuing a similar trade agreement with the European Union and New Zealand. India is also trying for its export diversification and is already targeting nearly 40 countries including Germany, Australia, South Korea, European Union and the United Kingdom. Also, we can see that it is maintaining its strategic autonomy in crucial structures and creating a digital infrastructure by the name Bharat Trade Net. So, these are the measures the Indian government is trying within the economy to build itself. But at the same time, India is also forging new alliances. We can see that India and China has come closer like never before. As we know, in the recent past, India and China have stopped all their diplomatic talks because of the border tensions. But in recent times, we see that both the countries have moved forward and is more and more focusing on the economic impact and how to face the US government. We can see that the Chinese government is also cooperating with India and both the leaders are continuously and constantly engaged in discussions and meetings which strengthens both the economies together. They have also said that the border issue should not be the sole defining criteria of a relationship between these two countries. We can see that China has already opened its market for Indian exports like the battery and the magnets. The Chinese government has also removed the export restrictions on key industry products. We also know that the direct flights between these countries have resumed recently. More connectivity means more engagement between the traders of both countries, and in the future years, we can see more economic trade and growth. Russia is an old and trusted ally of the Indians. Russia has stood tall in these difficult times also. We can see that the Russian envoy in New Delhi has openly condemned the US trade tariff policies, calling it unilateral and unjustified. Russians have stated that these policies are a neo-colonial attempt to maintain global hegemony over countries in the global south by the US. As an immediate support to the Indian government, both these countries have inked some pacts. We can see that the Russian and Indian government have decided to increase their trade to $100 billion by 2030. The Russians have already opened their export market to the Indian products, and India is using the BRICS and the SCO summit as a powerful platform to raise its concern. We know that we can see that Trump is already at loggerheads with the BRICS countries. Trump considers the BRICS as undermining the value of American dollar as a world's reserve currency, and he believes that this is a threat to American dominance and sovereignty. Trump has publicly stated that any country aligning with the anti-American policies of the BRICS countries will face an additional 10% tariffs. Ironically, however, we can see that these threats have brought the countries closer like never before. Even cautious countries like India and Brazil have openly supported policies that go against the US policies. We can see that in the recently concluded July summit of BRICS, the countries have decided to increase their trade and is also aiming for a de-dollarization. That is, the countries want the payment to be done in the local currencies and is opting for alternative payment systems or purchasing code. With financial institutions like New Development Bank in place, alternative payment systems and financial institutions like New Development Bank available, these countries want them to act as a substitute for the IMF and World Bank, which is largely controlled by the US government, as we all know. Also, this might help us to reduce the vulnerability to the US controlled financial institutions. These countries have also promised a sharing of incentives so that their vulnerability to these immediate shocks can be reduced. And the most recent update, the ongoing SCO summit in Tianjin is also seeing an enhanced cooperation between the countries. We can see that Indian Prime Minister is holding bilateral talks with the Russian and Chinese governments and fostering its bonds more and more. Also, the Tianjin Declaration has openly criticized the US trade tariff policy. As we can see, all these measures act as a strong deterrent to Trump's policy. We also know that recently the Prime Minister had visited Japan and had inked a lot of deals which will improve our economy in the coming years. So, unlike Trump's plan, and instead of fearing to his policies and bullying, the Indian government has given a strong step and hopefully it is restructuring the economy and diversifying its markets so that too much reliance does not lead us to such future shocks. We can see Trump is also facing criticism from various quarters. The Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman has said that Trump is unable to accept the erosion of its dominance in emerging multipolar international order and continues to pursue a neo-political agenda. But this is not limited to foreign countries. Even in his own country, he has faced a lot of criticism. The courts have refused to accept Trump's policies and tariffs. Also, the former US Secretary of State, John Kerry, has openly criticized Trump's trade and he has said that too much ordering, pressurizing and pushing around will be counterproductive and damage long-term alliances. Jeffrey Sachs, the renowned economist and professor, has called Trump's tariff on India the stupidest tactical move in the US foreign policy. So, Trump wished for an America First policy and to ensure that he made that other countries in the world suffered and had to face a penalty for improving their country's economy. But did these measures ultimately made America first? Of course, all the countries had to face some setbacks and an immediate shock. But as we can see, none of the countries seem to be bending to Trump's demands and instead they are forging new alliances. Trump has made possible seemingly impossible alliances with neighboring countries. And in such circumstances, we see that Trump's own policy backfiring. Yes, in the coming years, we can see that the US economy will have to bend to the might of the powerful countries like Russia, China, and of course India. Even when we consider the Indian and Chinese population itself together will be a big threat to any other country. So, we can safely say that these policies might have led us 2 steps back, but we are going to jump 5 steps ahead. Thank you.